faces. I don't know if you all had a chance to check out some of the information that I put on that page for you about like the process that I use with students all the time to devise new work. We're actually starting a new process as of yesterday with the high school conservatory. We read 5 new scripts have come out specifically for young people to be done over Zoom. So, like 10 ways to survive COVID-19. And so we read about 15 pages of each script, and they all are horrible. They're all not great. And so, yeah, I was hoping that they would agree with me that they weren't great. And so, it started a whole new chapter in having a Padlet with lots of ways for them to start brainstorming, starting another, a separate Padlet to start putting news stories of things that they're seeing that could be developed into a piece. So it's been really, it doesn't stop, which is kind of what I love about devising work, is that it can always be happening, and you can be creating work for this specific group that you have. So yeah, I don't know if you've got any questions for me right off the bat, or if you like me to kind of review some of the stuff that's on there. Hi, Mary Helen. So yeah, what are some of your thoughts, some questions?
Anyone want to start with a question?
I think troubleshooting would be something interesting to talk about, and how when things aren't going the way you intended, what some backup plans and things like that could be.
Yeah, I think you so there's a project that's actually on that just kind of went fully online, the Eco Tales free theater. The kids had to the next play that we were going to write was the climate change play. And we kind of got stopped in the middle of it. So I had them turn what they had already been working on into like radio plays. 2 groups kind of had a good grasp of what that was. One turned in a radio play that was not good, that I don't like. And sometimes you still have to put that stuff out there, because it's about, in my particular, the way I work, it's about the ensemble, right? So I want everyone to have their own autonomy and be able to contribute in their own way, and we've got to learn from what we've put out there. So I'm constantly, going back to old material and reusing it. So yeah, sometimes it's not going to work, but sometimes people who are in your ensemble don't know that until you put the work out. So sometimes, even as the director, or you just gotta put the work out, and then let that marinate out there before you come back to it and say, okay, let's compare this scene to this scene. How did it work? What can we keep? What should we discard? What did we learn? So sometimes that takes some time, but I find that there are problems all the time with that kind of thing, and you just have to trust, and then move forward and let it happen anyway. And then sometimes you don't know until it goes out. So recent project, I did a staged reading. Slack asked me to direct a staged reading for them, and I haven't done that in decades. And then they told me who was in my cast, and I was like, shit. Like, okay, I've got Rob Scott and Andra and Olivia Custodio and Joe Cernick. Like, people who are doing shows all the time, like they're not gonna like listen to me. And I'd read the script and it was quite magical, and I had heard that the playwright had requested me because she had seen Pinkalicious and thought that that was great. So she's like, I want Penny. So I'm in the rehearsal process, and it's a staged reading, but like I just felt like there needed to be movement. So I was like, what if we, you hold your scripts and you walk around in circles, because really there's this thing about circles. And then I just totally felt like one of those, like scarf wearing, big bead, like, ooh, circles, let's, and I kind of felt like, and it was just me. I felt like I could be making the worst decision and creating something where nothing needs to be created. But everybody let me play and let me do it anyway, whether they trusted me or not. I was the director. So they let me do that, and we kept it. And I kept making it more. And like, that was one of the biggest comments that we got out of that reading was like, wow, like that really helped X, Y, and Z, and I just got a lot of compliments on that later. And I really do think that it not only informed that reading, but it also kind of helped those actors play a little in a different way. So, you have to trust yourself. There should always be someone or a team that's kind of in charge of saying yay or nay to something, with say conservatory, I always employ, those my seniors and myself who, because typically those kids have been with me for 3 or 4 years, to kind of say yes or no if there's something that's really questionable or I don't like how something looks. But if not, I'm letting it go out, because most devised pieces that I have worked on are like living pieces. They can change. They are things that often come back and morph into something else. And until it's like published and printed and out there, like they're continuing to live. And that struggle usually comes from a place of a question about the direction of something, which is you kind of should lean into. So if someone says, this scene should be comedic versus no, we want to do this, or this is too preachy, or this is too something, like leaning into that moment and taking time out of the rehearsal process to really talk about it and kind of parse it out and make a web to see other things, maybe adding more text, maybe turning it on to movement, kind of exploring that is great. It's more work. It gives you more work for the final piece. So that's how I kind of approach conflict when it comes to, the actual piece. I kind of like it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If I may. So I was just chatting with a friend last night, and we were noting how, because so many theaters are pushing their seasons back like a whole year, basically all of 2021 has been cast because all these shows are like they're cast, and I'm realizing like maybe this is the year that a shit ton of new devised work is coming out, because we really do have to be creating our own work because there are very few opportunities. But at the same time, we're in the middle of like a very traumatic global experience. And I'm finding inspiration is not coming easily. And I think I often rely on like, oh, I just had an idea. Let's start working and playing with that. So I guess my question is, what are some of your favorite ways to like inspire yourself or create ideas that you can then start to run with when you're not feeling like, oh, the creative juices are just coming to me?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I would say, because when I rehearse with any group of students, I sometimes only see them once a week. and at max twice a week. And so I'm always looking for things that people can do and work on their own, or things that will be like smaller pieces that then we can group together, which also works for this particular time period. I'm a huge fan of epistolatory novels. So, right? So things that are novels that are written in the form of letters or diaries. And over the years, I have collected several. I was just looking, I've got my bookcase next to me, and I'm noticing, I just have, I've got like one that's like Requiem, I'll pull it out. Like Poems of the Terezin Ghetto. Like, this is a piece that was written in Terezin. I'm like, okay, this has got to be developed at some, like, this is a great piece, and maybe this is the right time. So I've got tons of books that are written in these kind of diary or letters. And I find those incredibly inspiring for me in all sorts of ways. Wicked Girls, which was our Salem Witch kind of Me Too piece, was based on an epistolatory idea, diaries. One of the future projects for conservatory based on love letters that are love letters to exes as they're returning an item that they don't want anymore. And there's a book called Why We Broke Up, where it's all, the girl returns this big box of things she doesn't want anymore, and then there's like a letter for each item. So we read part of that, and then I'm like, we could do our own. You guys have all broken up with someone, come on, or you wanted to, or they broke up with you. This is great material. So I love it, and the news, but also like looking at old news. One of my first jobs at the University of Utah when I was a student a bajillion years ago was working on the fourth floor of the library and copying newspaper clippings to put in like the microfiche. That was like my work study job. And so I just was like, wow, all of these old newspaper things. And now you can just like go online and find a date in history and just look to see what's there, and some old story will come out. There's a great play, Elephant's Graveyard, which also has a lot of monologues, which I think could be a great kind of Zoom piece, about, an elephant that was killed, that was like, I think it was hung, or so because it like attacked. I don't know the whole story, but it's a great play. I saw it years ago. But that was based on an old, on a newspaper article. So I kind of, that's where I go first. I go to the diaries, I go to letters and novels that are written that way. And then that always leads me to something else. But that's where I start, mostly because I'm always looking for kind of monologue based work that then I can weave these ensemble pieces, just because of the nature of the type of time I have with students. Yeah, but there's a ton of those out there. Natalie.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering, I wanted to hear about your transition from an actor to a director, and kind of, yeah, just how that transition worked and any tips you have about that.
Yeah, so I'm from California, and so I did a lot of acting and a lot of voiceover work out there from Southern California. So I worked at Disneyland and did some voiceover work with them. I did a lot of like children's albums when I was younger. I did parts of tours that would come through, and I would just do like fill in the Los Angeles part of that tour. And then I did a cruise. I just did that for like 6 months. I did a couple of Alaska cruises, which is why I still want to like live in Alaska. So the transition started as a choreography kind of thing. It started as like from dance captain to assistant choreographer. And that started happening in California first. So I had a couple of like assistant choreography and dance captain credits. When I came out here to Utah, Pioneer Theater had a resident musical director and a resident choreographer. Jane Luke was the resident choreographer, and she'd been there for decades. She also did a lot of work at other theaters. So she was choreographing at the Grand and doing work at Salt Lake Acting Company, and she also ran Sundance, the summer Sundance program. There was a time where she needed a assistant because she was choreographing something at the Grand and they were producing Edwin Drood up at PTC at the same time. And she found out that, the community people who were in Oklahoma, weren't like grasping the dream ballet as quickly as she had hoped. Interesting is that Brent Schneider, who is now one of the teachers and was the chair of the dance department at the U, he was one of the dancers on that project. So I got to choreograph the department head of the dance part of modern dance years ago, which is crazy. So she needed an assistant and she'd never had one before. So I became her assistant on that project and essentially had to finish Oklahoma for her in her style while she was working on Edwin Drood. She came back, saw the show, and was like, "Thank you, Penny, for making it look like I finished the show." And that kind of started spreading around. The same thing happened with Jim Christian, who ran the program up at Weber State for many years. He had pitched a show for Broadway, Pirated Penzance, and he had started choreographing 42nd Street, but he couldn't finish it. He'd done all the feet, but he didn't do any of the arms. That's actually one of the tours that I'd been on before. So then he left for New York and I had to finish that choreography. And then when he took his sabbatical, I ended up taking over his teaching assignments up at Weber. So I would say my recommendation is where these people are working, anybody who's working often has these side gigs that they're doing, right? That may be at a more community level. It's like finding out where those people are and getting in a show, becoming the person that's there early, that leaves late, being that dance captain, being the assistant, I'll do warm-ups on the piano. Well, it's like I think although there are many ways that musical theater and theater is innovating for the future, there are many kind of old school things that still exist. And that sense of like, we're all in this together, people who show up early and go, like that still very much exists in the theater world. So like, and there's also, I think, a feeling of, although people want to help each other up, they've got to see how much skin you've got in the game, right? So people were very, I remember Jane Luke being very tentative to take on any assistant. She didn't trust anybody. But I had been very diligent and was there always with a smile on my face, never had an attitude problem, never talked to anybody else. My focus was to have the same amount of fun in rehearsal, but not have to be there for the shows. Like my goal was to get on the other side of the table. So although I had friends, I could care less. I wanted to really look good for the production team because I wanted to be on that team. And so once I became her assistant for that one project, then she started throwing a ton of other projects at me because I had proven myself really reliable. And I wasn't also looking to make myself look good. I was always there in the service of either the play, of either that particular theater. And I also think that that's something that keeps me working. Even I've done more than 10 shows at Slack. And part of that is because I really have learned not to care about like my ego in that sense. It's really about serving that artistic director or the theater and the story, of course, but it's about, you know, being that kind of team player, that it's not about you, it's about the work, it's about keeping these companies going so that there continues to be more work for you. Also letting people know that you're interested in becoming a choreographer, becoming a director, because even for me, you know, here in Salt Lake, we have this incredible opportunity at, you know, for people to partner with directors and be like in that university program at SLAC, and other theaters are doing that same sort of thing. So, you know, when someone tells me, hey, I'm interested in that thing, you know, I'm interested in being your assistant director at SLAC, they move up to the top of my list. You know, I don't want to have to go searching for someone. If someone comes to me and says, hey, you know, I want to be able to do this, then like, awesome, you just took something off of my list from having to find someone, you know. So I would say offering, if that's what you're really interested in, letting people know that this is what you want to do. And in some cases, that also means that, you know, maybe you're sitting in rehearsals helping someone out for free at first, which is I would love to sit in on one of Karen's rehearsals anyway, or anybody's rehearsal, Jason Bowcut's rehearsals. I just love, you know, so I'll take a smaller gig to be in the room. I'll take a smaller check or no check just so I can be in the room, because also having your face in the room makes it easier for you to get the job the next time.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
I have a question. So going back to talking about like creating these devised pieces with conservatory and just in general, how do you like facilitate the conversations about like, oh, what worked and what didn't? Like, I feel like that's often can be a difficult conversation to have, especially with students, but even when it's just people who are new to writing or who are creating their own work, to like be able to look at it objectively and like use that in a productive way.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to have like the best answer for this, because I still feel like I wouldn't you know, I'm not a playwright. I didn't go to school for this. So what we talk about is, first of all, we have to have had an audience in the room at some point before we can talk about it. And that audience could also be like invited guests, parents. You know, I often will do that, where I'll invite a certain number of people to come see a work in progress. And then we do a post-show talk back. And then after that talk back, I'll assign people to be either collecting that information. Oftentimes we put together half sheets of questions for people to fill out, or, you know, we've done like a Google form where people can kind of scan something on their phone and quickly do a Google form. And the reason why I do that is because it helps facilitate the harder conversations you're going to have, right? So, and you might have some biases that you're unaware of. So by inviting some people, even if it's 3 people, and even if it's people that you are, let's say you have a thought, like you don't like a particular scene, right? And you really want to get rid of it, but you don't want to be like the person, you know, you're working in an ensemble, so you don't want to be that jerk, right? So you can load that thing and invite 3 people who you think like you, and it still may come up they're going to hear something different. So you're still going to get information from people that you trust. So sometimes it's not bad to kind of like preload it. So like some of you know Darren Hathaway, who's the high school teacher at Judge. Like I'll use him a lot because we tend to think the same way. I'll use people who've been in, say, conservatory before. I'll invite, you know, a super senior to come back and look at something, thinking that they're going to think my way, and sometimes they don't, or sometimes they'll pick something out. So having set questions, or developing those questions with your ensemble. Let's invite people to come see this one song or this one scene and give us an idea. So for example, in our play about school shootings, there are funny scenes. There are scenes that are almost inappropriately funny. There's a whole front section where they're introducing all the kind of major shooting incidences, and it almost could look like we're glorifying it. We're absolutely not, but it could look that way. And so we put those 3 scenes, that we had 3 funny scenes in the show, and we invited like 5 people to come see those scenes to tell us if it's inappropriate, if we should even go in this direction. But with my students, we developed the questions that we wanted to ask together before they came. Like, what is it that we want to know? Why is this scene uncomfortable to me? Or why does it feel like it's not working? And why does it feel like it's working for you? Or why do you feel like it should be in? And then we develop, you know, 5 questions, invite people, have them answer those questions, talk about it, and then we have our answers. So I think approaching it that way is helpful, because again, like I wouldn't consider myself, we've written a lot of plays together, but I wouldn't consider myself a playwright, because, you know, I didn't go to school for that. So I don't know what the rules are, but I'm really good at like watching shows. I'm a really great audience member, and I know what it is I like and what I don't like. So I just don't want to see something I don't like. Does that kind of answer your question? So
yeah, that does. Thank you.
So sometimes it'll be like, we just have one song and I like just need feedback on that thing. So I'm constantly pulling 2 people in to take a look at something or listen to something or watch them do some piece of movement and go, did you like that? What do you think? I think that that's important.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions from the crowd?
I have a question. It's not actually about devising. I'm just wondering, what's the plan for youth theater this summer? Are you still going on, or are you doing online, or what's your thoughts?
Right now, so we don't have our own space, right? So we have to follow university policy. Currently, right now, for all youth camps, including Club U and Tanner Dance, supposedly a Natural History Museum, Red Butte Gardens, all of us have to follow these policies that the U puts out. So the associate dean for like youth programming put out something saying that classes can't happen until at the earliest July 1st. And that after July 1st, there would be, or by July 1st, there'd be another, like, we could look at it again. We can look at what's happening in the world and reevaluate again. But that there was no date set for them to reevaluate. So the only date I've gotten is July 1st. I've been looking at everybody else's website. I've been like stalking the Natural History Museum and Club U. They're still taking registration for camps that are starting in June. Tanner Dance still has registration. Like, we've refunded everything for the summer already because we already had people registering. We've refunded and closed that stuff down. I know how well or how not well they clean FA and our new building. And I'm just thinking, like, even just like the doors or the ballet bars or anything, like, they don't clean our buildings very well. I don't feel comfortable having a bunch of kids in there, you know, even in July or August, right? Like, am I gonna have a class of 10 people only? I don't know. So it doesn't feel safe to me to have to hold class until there's a vaccine.
Could you?
It doesn't feel, what? Sorry.
Go ahead.
It just doesn't feel safe. So we've put everything on hold. We're doing some online offerings right now. Chessie and Sydney have been helping. It's asynchronous. So I'm finding that right now, because of school still happening and there's just a lot of kids that are overwhelmed with schoolwork, a lot of parents that are overwhelmed. We're not getting as much hits on our videos and people going on to look at stuff. A lot of parents have emailed that they're so grateful that everything's up there, but we're not seeing the engagement that I'd like to see. We have 2 synchronous classes. Conservatory is still meeting for 2 hours twice a week. And that is difficult to fill all of that time and to look at, 19 faces. And they're freaking out. Those kids are, I mean, I don't know how you guys are doing because you're young too, but like they're depressed. They are sad. So I'd say half of them are fine and the other half are really not fine. Really not fine. A lot of them are not used to being at home as much as they are because, they're the theater kids and they did a lot of other groups so that they didn't have to be home. So having to be home is a problem. My younger kids, we're doing a show right now that's online. It's like crazy town. It's like, I feel like seasick and nauseous when they're constantly changing their back screens. They're like moving everywhere. We try to read through a script and everybody's Wi-Fi is like so different that like they're glitching out half the time that you're like, oh, it's just giving me anxiety. And the amount of flippin' planning that it takes to do an online course is huge because there's just so much that you have to do ahead of time to plan it out that I'm really struggling. Also, I'm finding it really interesting that there are lots of, say with like the network of friends that you may have in the business around you, everyone's kind of like competing for these virtual students. And so we're not having like nice conversations about like, what are you doing that's working? Well, they don't want to tell you what's working for them. Or like, what are you doing that's, so I'm having a hard time trying to organize those people together to have a real conversation and see how we can maybe pool our resources to help everybody, because people don't want to have that conversation yet. But everyone's losing their shirts. We will be in debt for the next 4 years trying to recover from just this one summer. Because our summer does everything. And so there are going to be I have to make some real decisions soon. But yeah, we'll be in the hole about $120,000 in June at the end of this fiscal year. And trying to make that up is going to be, it'll take us years. So like crossing my fingers that they don't get rid of us in that time. Welcome to the world of nonprofits. So that was like a long answer to your question. So I don't know what we're doing, probably nothing. Probably the same thing that we're doing right now. I just don't know. I feel like I'm going to webinars I went to a webinar right before this and I didn't get any answers. And it was like there were 700 people attending that webinar from across the country on higher ed, youth programs, and the trends to online learning. I took 3 pages of notes, but none of it's helpful. So we'll figure it out. We always do, right? We all will. And I think you're right, Mary, there'll be lots of new work.
I hope so. Yeah. I guess my follow-up to that is like, and I know you touched on this a little bit at the beginning of what you're doing with conservatory right now, but have you like found any devising methods from far away that you've liked? Are you focusing more on like text? I mean, I'm sure you're focusing more on text-based methods, but yeah.
Yeah, right. Because the movement is hard right now. Well, I just think right now motivation is hard. Their intrinsic motivation to actually log on is difficult. I even proposed that we only meet once a week because I just felt like I was pulling teeth to get them to meet. And then they said no. That they wanted to continue to meet twice a week. But I'm finding it challenging myself to be motivated to work with them. So, because they're not turning work in on time. So they've got like a first, we're working on monologues right now. They've got their first draft due. Only about half of them have done it. But this is the case across the nation, right? Like there's at least even in the best school, there are at least 20% of kids who are not logging on, just not logging on. And in some districts and some schools, that's much higher, where they have more than half of their kids not doing it, or deciding they just don't want to do the assignment, or they don't have time. And then teachers are also like, I had 2 students who had to take a physics exam at 5 p.m. So then they couldn't come to rehearsal. So I just think that there's a lot of stuff that they're navigating right now. And there are some schools that are thinking of going into the summer as well. So how does that impact theater school or anything that we offer? Yeah, it's all crazy. And whether it's not this year, they're also thinking of extending the school year next year to make up for some of the time that's lost. So yeah, and we just still don't have like any real answers as to what's going on in the fall at the U. We've been told to make sure we have a plan in place for online classes for us, to make sure everything is ready to go online. And there are some schools that aren't meeting at all some universities that aren't meeting at all until 2021. I just think it's going to be really crazy when everyone starts coming back. I mean, you guys are supposed to know pretty soon what the plan is, but they haven't told us. And we had a town meeting with Ruth Watkins, the president, and we didn't get any answers. So no one knows what to do. So I don't have, I don't know of other companies. Well, Rising Youth Theater, which is in Arizona, they devise a lot. And so they're still devising. They do a cool thing. They do like these tracks plays where at different stops on their kind of track system, there'll be another play that's happening once people get off. And they'll send out their like high school group out there, and they have different things happening at the different track stations. And so that's like their big summer kind of event. So they're doing some of that still, but online. Because those are like 1 or 2 person pieces, and some of it's musical. So they're kind of doing that. I was on a call with someone from Oregon Children's Theater yesterday. And she said something, and I don't think she even paid attention to what she was saying, but she was talking about drive-in movies. And so this whole idea of like a drive-in play where everybody can stay like in a parking lot, right? Like you can take over church parking lots and people could drive in their cars, drive in, and then people could stay far away. I thought, like, wouldn't that be fun, like in October for like scary stories? Right? People might not be able to go to like the corn mazes or some of these where there's all these people, but maybe we could have like drive-in spooky stories at a cemetery parking lot. And maybe it's like a progressive dinner where you start at one place and then you take your car and you go somewhere else and you see like the next part of the scary story or something. So that's something that sounded really kind of fun and interesting to me, drive-in plays. So no, I'm just like trying to like take any little bit that I hear and write it down in hopes that maybe the great idea comes. But yeah, I don't know. A lot of other companies that I love are just putting their old work online, which is awesome, which I'm delighted to see, but I think we need more work for this time. That's not just monologues, or that's not just virtual choirs, although I love them. And that's not just, passing your book to the next person and then having them pass it around. Like, yeah. So I haven't, so I feel like I know how to devise in the room. I don't yet know how to devise in the space. We're doing our best, again, based on these kind of, letters and diary entries. Yeah, I've got some thinking and work to do.
I know that there's like a huge kick towards journaling right now with everything that's happening. I'm sure there's going to be so much great material if people are willing to share their journals from all of this and stringing it together to make something after or during all of this.
Yeah, right. I mean, I've been trying to even like push Presley, my daughter, to journal. She's really resistant. And a lot of kids are. I've been talking to the high school kids about that same thing. Or the last show that we were going to produce at Kingsbury Hall was based on journals as well, across the prairie, based on Oregon Trail journals. And so I even had an assignment that went out to those schools that's like, this is your time, like write a journal entry. We could write a whole nother musical about it, right? But it's very low engagement right now. So
I wonder if video journaling, I've been thinking about video journaling just because I know, like, as a theater kid, I'm like a very social verbal learner. So I learn more about my own thoughts when I get to share it with someone else verbally. So I think that could be an interesting exercise to try that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess in an ideal world, what would you want? What would be something cool to come out of this? Like, what kind of content could we be creating? I think that, I guess right now, I feel like maybe just like what's the like really crazy, if you had all the resources in the world, kind of amazing thing that you would make with this, and then just to think about.
Well, I think there was a show that came out 2 years ago in 2018. It was a partnership with Trustee Sidekick, which is a company in New York, and the Lincoln Center. There was like a big like balloon festival that was happening in New York, somewhere in New York. And so they do like immersive theater. So they had like these like balloons in this space. It was like their set pieces, and they had, like the basket, that's where the audience would sit. They would sit inside these baskets. So they had like, and they were just like made out of wood. Like they weren't real baskets. And when they filmed it in 360. So like you can watch this today. It's available now, I think, on the Lincoln Center website, because they're, you can go and move the camera anywhere and see the whole show. So I think it'd be incredible to have a show with maybe even just like, 3 professional actors with a really cool set that could be filmed in 360, so that you can still, as an audience member, decide where you want to look. Because that's the other thing, like I hate having to look at what somebody else tells me to watch, but I love being able to move that screen around. I think that'd be incredible. So being able to meet in small, I think when we meet in small groups, and maybe devising something for a small group that way would be really neat. So if I had all the money in the world, I'd figure a way to do that somehow. I also wish I wish personally I had better like editing skills. Because I think even with some of this work that's just, maybe piecing monologues together, I think it could be done beautifully if, like, for example, is this the time for youth theater and Spy Hop to merge somehow, and give they could give us some of their editing, we can give them material to edit. So because my editing skills are not gonna cut it. I mean, they'll be fine, but it'll just be fine. And I think, like that video that was just put out for the MTP, that freshman class, like, Alex Marshall has some really great skills and that looked beautiful. But that takes time and money and some editing skills. It's not just an app that you can buy. So that's another thing I need to learn quick. So I can make whatever it is that we put out look like it's the next level. Because if it looks the same, if it looks like something that someone can produce at home, then it's also not going to be something that parents are going to want to pay for, or not that something that like people are going to want to be a part of. So we've got to kind of up that production quality. But again, all of that takes time and money that right now, like it already doesn't exist. So there's that. But everything else on the devising, like on my chart of devising, everything else is the same. Like we're in the brainstorming phase. We don't have sticky notes, but we've got Padlet, which I love. If you haven't used Padlet before, I love Padlet because it's just like sticky notes on a board, and you can put anything in there. I love making playlists, and that's something that I learned from a Frantic Assembly workshop years ago, where I'm like, where is this, like, I love all this music, and someone's like, yeah, here's our Spotify playlist. Then I went, and they have like a playlist for every show of songs that they used and songs that they're just used in rehearsals. I'm like, wow, everybody should have this. So I just love having that and creating playlists for what the kids are thinking and having us all kind of contribute to that. Love that. I think it's so creative, and it also lets me, you can hear how someone's feeling or about a piece just by the music that they pick, right? I do want to do something with like vision boards. I feel like everybody needs to kind of be a little more tactile with what they're feeling. So I was feeling like I need to do that with a future project and start putting together my vision board. And I thought that could be a really cool project for us to do together as an ensemble, and sharing what that would look like as we create, like, instead of just creating a mission statement together, creating our vision board for what we hope that show will do and become and what it will look like. So that's something that I want to do. But yeah, but I almost never know what it's going to look like in the end from when we start. I always bring in people to do workshops with the kids, and then I think, well, we didn't use any of that in the final piece. But it's just about, kind of giving yourself time to work on all those things and plant seeds of ideas everywhere. It's time to do a whole puppet show. I think it'd be cute. Sock puppets, like using like real gross, ugly socks. Like I think there's a place for that. We read one of the scripts that we read that's put out for middle school and high school kids was really bad. And there was a whole scene, a Romeo and Juliet scene in the time of quarantine. And it was just so bad. And after it was over, I said, I think we could do, like, the only way to make this okay is if it were with puppets. And then all of a sudden it saves this entire play. So I think this is a good time for puppets.
I agree. We just did our online theater thing that we've been working on for Open Door, and I wrote a whole puppet scene that's in that now. So
it's the time for puppets.
And out next week, hopefully, so you can watch it then. A plug.
That's awesome. Yeah. Sure. I will be showing that to everyone in conservatory for sure. So that, and then going back, a lot of people are going back to old work and figuring out how to share that. So right now, I'm taking all the songs, I'm having all the kids, teaching 10-year-olds how to record their voices to send in has been challenging. And I'm doing that with a 4th grade class. They're taking a Maya Angelou poem and turning that into a video piece that they want to share. And so I've tried to come up with a simple way for kids to record their voices and send them to me so that it's all kind of the same quality. I'm finding out that using the record button in PowerPoint is not a bad option for this sort of thing, right? So that every line is on a different slide. The other thing that's nice about it is that you can then type in your lines while you record, so you don't have to have like a separate piece of paper. And then if you download that a certain way, you can if you turn it into a zip file, then uncompress it, all the WAV files will show up, and then you'll have each individual sound thing will pop up, and then you can put those together. So I'm using that idea with these young people because it's a lot easier, and not although using this is fine, a lot of people don't have access to very good recorders on their phones, and a lot of people do have PowerPoint. It doesn't matter if you have a Mac or not. They do have PowerPoint. So playing with that idea and trying to put out the music, because I'm also trying to save, the grants and fulfill all the grants that we've already written. That's also been like the tricky thing, that a lot of people have grants that they can't fulfill now. And so, I'm scrambling to kind of put out work so that I can fulfill those grant responsibilities and make a lot of people happy that way, or make them not unhappy. Oh.
Great. Does anyone else have another question before we wrap things up? Great. Well, thank you for coming and talking to us, Penny. This was awesome.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, you guys. It's great to see some happy faces. So thanks for being here. I appreciate your time.
Great.